ceasefire agreement has been reached between Israel and Hamas. How do you feel particularly about this finally being reached?
Well, uMkhonto as a party, we've always said we are against the atrocities that are happening in that region. Many people have died over the past 15 months, children, innocent people, families, women. And it was something that is totally unnecessary. So we're quite glad that a ceasefire agreement has, or they've arrived at a ceasefire agreement. But it does not help when already there are threats that should this ceasefire agreement fall apart, there will be a second phase or a second engagement of the same atrocities for them to repeat it. It doesn't help at all. I think it took 15 months in people's lives to reach at this agreement, and unnecessarily so in terms of how it even started. So we just hope that in the people of Palestine find hope in as much as they have gone through a lot. But we believe that it just shows a blink of hope for them. Now they can go back. We are also happy to see that there's been humanitarian aid, form of food, medicine, fuel, we also understand, and water. So wherever we can play a role, as we've played a role, we will continue to do so, because we in this country suffered similar, genocide under apartheid.
So your party, the MK, holds the chairmanship of the Southern Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament. What is the feeling of the Parliament, particularly in relation to this deal?
Well, I can't speak for the Parliament per se, but I can speak on behalf of MK in light of the fact that the Southern Caucus is chaired by Honorable Duduzile Sambudla Zuma. And that we believe that the Southern Caucus in this case would share the same sentiment, and therefore the chairperson would share the same sentiment, because it has been a very worrisome issue, especially also the fact that we've commented about what's happening in Mozambique from a Southern Caucus perspective. I'm sure the Southern Caucus will release a statement pertaining to today's ceasefire agreement. But I think one of the things that they will agitate for is the continuation of peace, and that there must be alignment in terms of how things unfold, and so that it doesn't lead to a perpetuation of what led to today.
So do you think it's going to hold?
We would really hope that it would hold. As I said, when at the brink or immediately after having come to an agreement, you make certain comments that are unproductive to the situation very early, a couple of hours after the agreement is signed. It doesn't really help, because then it brings about questions as to what your sentiment of actually concluding the agreements were in the first place. Are they genuine or are they not? So these are things that do not help the cause of bringing about a peaceful agreement and a transition for people to get back to living their lives peacefully. Such comments, unfortunately, leave a bitter taste in anyone who wants to see this agreement become a successful long one.
Based on those very comments that there might be a resumption of the war against Hamas, what do you think South Africa should do, given the fact that it's already filed a genocide case? How do you think South Africa should navigate and move around the probability of that unfolding?
I don't think moving around it is going to help. I think we just need to deal with things head on for what they are. And that's what we in Parliament as uMkhonto Wesizwe, official opposition, will ensure that we hold the government to account for. Because we've said that we want a peaceful transition, and for people, and for this agreement to in effect take effect. So we're saying that we will be watching and continue to watch. We'll continue to support the people of Palestine. We'll continue to support a ceasefire agreement that does not perpetuate what started the situation in the first place. So we're just hoping that people do come to their senses and not forget that they are leaders of people. They are leaders of innocent lives. They are leaders of women and children. And it's about time that we bring about an end to war. Why should we be having war? Why should women and children become casualties of personalities, political personalities? This is not what we expect a world that we want to live in to be. So leaders need to take such things into consideration. And also the UN Security Council also needs to step in here. And we need to start reviewing the issue of veto rights. You know, where when something is happening in a specific region, a specific country, you've got the powers all of a sudden to cop out by virtue of veto rights. No. If we're going to be living in a world that we want, which is peaceful, we need to ensure that certain people are held to account. And the UN Security Council is also one of those that ought to be responsible in ensuring that this does not happen again.
Given the fact that the MK party is the official opposition party in Parliament, of which we know the ANC is in a government of national unity governing alongside the DA, putting aside the DA and looking at the ANC-led government, which actually filed the genocide case, as the official opposition, do you believe that South Africa has been successful in its efforts to get the people of Palestine out of this genocidal situation that they're in?
Well, firstly, I want to touch on the fact that the government of so-called national unity is just a cop-out position and a sell-out position by the president of this country. It's a fact. He didn't have to, and we shouldn't associate the success of that case to this so-called GNU. There's uMkhonto Wesizwe, there's the EFF, the Economic Freedom Front fighters, and there's the ANC. The three of us could have formed a coalition, and we could have been the ones that are governing this country. But instead, by virtue of this so-called sell-out GNU, by the sell-out president that we have in this country, he took the black vote and he gave it to racist whites. And now, all of a sudden, the same racist whites, by the way, who were against people of Palestine. So as you can see, this is a total mess in of itself, because there's a dichotomy in views and in policy between the ANC and the DA in the first place. So as to how you sleep in bed with a racist and your oppressor is quite baffling, because these are the same people that perpetuated the same situation that is in Gaza during apartheid in this country. And now you're expecting them to have a position that says that they support a case against Israel and its activities in Gaza. No. So that in of itself, I guess, is a telling story about this so-called GNU. So we're saying, yes, we will hold the government as we ought to, and ensure that we monitor their activities. But wherever we can play a role, we'll certainly play a role as uMkhonto Wesizwe party. There's no doubt about that.
Moving on to Africa as a whole, a number of countries have kicked out Western troops from their territories. Are you surprised to see that? And was it a right decision for those countries to do it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's about time that Africa takes center stage in geopolitics, takes center stage in global economic participation, because it has continuously been abused, in a sense that many other countries' growth is off the back of African resources. And those African resources are extracted off the back of control that came with slavery, control that came with colonialism, and then, you know, taking African countries as though they were their own little game or their own little background or playground. You can't take a country which has got its own culture, its own dignity, its own resources, God-given, by the way, and then think that you're going to take that sovereignty and make it a monopoly game. Gone are those days. So we fully support what's happening there. We fully support the likes of young leaders such as Traore of Burkina Faso, with him now saying, I don't want any more interference. Leave us to ourselves. And we're saying the same thing also in South Africa. Leave us to ourselves. Why must you interfere? You know, same thing as in Mali. We are fully in support of what is happening there, and we'll fully support the program of decolonizing themselves and becoming independent. whether it be from the extraction of raw materials, whether it be from a security perspective, and whether it be from a trade perspective. We fully support them.
What do you think of initiatives that have been put together or organized by the African Union, I should say, like the payment settlement system and the African Free Trade or Continental Free Trade Area?
Well, the Continental Free Trade Area is a good initiative. Initiatives can only be initiatives until they're actually implemented and taken seriously. One of the other key challenges with trade on the African continent is the issue of borders, I guess, and the ability to get visas. You know, in Europe, you get a visa, you get a Schengen visa, you're able to travel. That facilitates trade. We need to look at mechanisms here that obviously do not undermine any country's sovereignty and its security, that will facilitate and ensure that we become a catalyst for this African trade initiative to take its course. So we are all for using technological platforms to facilitate trade between the countries, for instance. And nothing is stopping us from that. So we fully are behind Africans trading with Africans. We know that, for instance, a country such as ours and many other countries are globally local and locally global. But we need to be Africanized in how we trade. And the more we start to trade with our brothers and sisters in the African continent, the better.
My last question is, how do you view South Africa's current and future role in reshaping the global economic order?
Well, as I said, South Africa is a locally global and a globally local country. It is the gateway into Africa, as you have seen also from a South-South trade perspective. The mere fact that we're part of BRICS and we're the first African country to be part of BRICS in of itself is telling about the importance of South Africa. Remember, if you need to trade between the west side of the world, or the globe, to the east side of the globe, you have to go past our waters, which is in the Western Cape. So from a trade perspective, that's where trade actually really happens. And it happens on the South African shores. So if there is a role that South Africa plays by virtue of our geopositioning, that alone tells you the importance of South Africa's role. What we need to do is to ensure that whatever kind of trade initiatives that go past in our borders on the African continent, because we are part of Africa, become the gateway into the rest of Africa, and that the rest of Africa see us as a gateway into the rest of the world. And obviously leveraging BRICS. So the sooner, like what we've seen now with Nigeria joining BRICS, the sooner African countries become part of this, the better it will be for Africa. Because as Muammar Gaddafi at one point wanted, his vision was a currency for Africa. We believe, what's stopping the BRICS currency from being the currency for the globe? Nothing is stopping that. And therefore, a currency for Africa. So we need to ensure that as South Africa, we facilitate, we agitate African countries to participate in the geopolitical and the geo-trade space.
We're talking about global economics here, and you have big global players like America, of which you have Donald Trump threatening tariff hikes for this notion of a de-dollarization move and a BRICS currency. How do you counter that? And how do you factor it in terms of still ensuring that Africa has a voice in global economics?
Well, part of the reason why there is a BRICS in the first place is because we wanted to be self-independent and self-sufficient and not necessarily depend on the likes of the IMF and the World Bank that come with punitive policies. Now, with the BRICS Bank, that allows us to engage in trade as African countries and as BRICS member states without having to rely on foreign payment platforms, for instance. One of the key things is we're seeing the special reserves on Bitcoin being used. And that also allows for internet currencies are going to be hedged against Bitcoin, for instance, special reserve. So as uMkhonto Wesizwe party, we're saying that we cannot be bullied into policies or how people view their challenges and then try and, project their challenges on us. If we feel in a globally free world that we want to adopt a certain currency, it cannot be that we're now being threatened and that we should be threatened as BRICS countries. No. I think the approach should be different. What we're wanting to do is to ensure that we facilitate trade for countries that are developmental countries, and because we also want to become as big as some of these Western countries. Why not? Well, they're referred to as superpowers, I guess. Then that's the case. And maybe the superpower is a superpower, and they're feeling a new superpower coming in the form of BRICS.